every time you cancel plans to stay home, a specific neurotransmitter surges in your brain. Society calls this behavior lazy, but neuroscientists call it survival. You are not antisocial, and your brain is not broken. Your nervous system is simply operating on a completely different chemical hierarchy. It is Friday night. Your phone buzzes with a final invitation to go out. You type a quick apology, hit send, and immediately you feel a profound wave of relief wash over you. But seconds later, that relief is followed by a heavy, familiar shadow. Guilt. We have been conditioned by a highly extroverted society to believe that happiness only exists out there, in the noise, the crowds, and the constant networking. We are told that choosing an evening in a quiet room means we are isolating ourselves, or worse, slipping into depression. But let us look at the actual neuroscience. The guilt you feel is a learned psychological response, not a biological truth. When you choose solitude over a crowded room, you are not running away from connection. You are answering a biological command to protect your central nervous system from sensory overload. The problem has never been your personality. The problem is that you are judging your unique neurochemistry by a standard built for a completely different type of human brain. Let us examine what happens inside your brain when you are forced into a crowded, noisy environment. To understand this, we have to talk about the dopamine illusion. Society has convinced us that being outgoing, loud, and constantly seeking new social interactions is the baseline for a healthy, happy human. But from a neurological standpoint, this is a massive misconception. The extroverted behavior that our culture idolizes is actually driven by a relentless craving for dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, often labeled as the reward chemical. It is the brain's way of saying, do that again. It feels good. Extroverts have a lower baseline of arousal, which means their dopamine receptors are less sensitive. To feel normal, to feel alive, they require an intense amount of external stimulation. They need the roaring music at a club, the unpredictable energy of a massive party, and the constant stream of small talk. They are, in a very clinical sense, chasing a dopamine high just to reach a baseline level of satisfaction. But your brain is structurally different. If you are someone who deeply prefers staying at home, brain scans reveal that you possess a highly sensitive dopamine reward system. Your receptors are incredibly efficient. You do not need a loud room of strangers to feel stimulated. In fact, when you are pushed into that exact same crowded environment, your nervous system does not register it as a reward. It registers it as a threat. Because your dopamine pathway is so highly attuned, a loud social gathering floods your system with too much chemical information all at once. This is not social anxiety. This is a biological phenomenon known as sensory overload. Your brain is literally processing too many variables, too many voices, and too much unpredictable stimuli. The exhaustion you feel after a few hours at a party is not a character flaw. It is your brain desperately trying to manage a neurochemical flood that it did not ask for. This brings us to a harsh reality. The world we live in, the modern corporate environment, the networking events, the societal expectations, they were all designed by and for people who are chronically understimulated. They built a world that constantly feeds their need for dopamine, and they labeled it as the standard for success. When you feel guilty for wanting to go back to your quiet living room, you are feeling guilty for not wanting to play a rigged game. You are trying to force a highly tuned, sensitive neurological instrument to operate in a factory of chaos. Your desire to leave the party, to decline the invitation, and to simply be in your own space is your nervous system's intelligent way of preventing a complete systemic crash. You are not missing out on life. You are regulating your biology. Now that we understand the dopamine overload, we have to look at the exact opposite of the spectrum. What happens in your nervous system the moment you walk through your front door turn the deadbolt, and finally enter the absolute quiet of your own space. This is where a completely different, and arguably much more powerful, neurochemical takes over. It is called acetylcholine. While extroverted brains are constantly chasing the high energy rush of dopamine, your brain is structurally and biologically optimized for acetylcholine. If dopamine is the chemical of outward pursuit, loud environments, and external reward, acetylcholine is the chemical of internal peace, intense focus, and deep cognitive processing. It is the biological foundation of your comfort zone. But here's the truly fascinating part about how this specific neurotransmitter works in your body. Acetylcholine cannot properly flood your central nervous system when you are surrounded by chaos. It is fundamentally incompatible with high-stress environments. It requires a dramatic and sustained reduction in external stimuli to fully activate. The loud noises have to stop. The unpredictable social demands have to completely disappear. The forced small talk must end. This is exactly why that profound, almost heavy sense of physical and mental relief washes over you the very second you are completely alone in your room. Your physical environment has finally quieted down enough for your brain to safely switch its primary operating system. When your brain starts running optimally on acetylcholine, you enter a physiological state that neuroscientists refer to as parasympathetic dominance. This is often called the rest and digest state, but calling it just rest is a massive understatement. Acetylcholine is the primary driver of what psychologists call the flow state. Think about those specific moments when you are completely immersed in reading a complex book, watching a deeply layered film, or just sitting in silence following a long, intricate train of thought for 3 or 4 hours straight without feeling fatigued. Society might look at you sitting quietly on the couch for hours and immediately label it as doing nothing or being unproductive. But if we look inside your skull, your brain is operating at a remarkably high level. It is actively repairing neural pathways that were damaged by stress. It is consolidating short-term experiences into long-term memories. It is drawing deep, creative connections between ideas that are simply impossible to form when you are distracted in a loud, crowded room. You are not just recovering from the exhaustion of the outside world. You are engaging in a highly complex biological process of mental regeneration. For a brain that is wired this way, staying home is never a passive activity. It is a highly active, deeply necessary physiological mechanism. It is your brain applying an evolutionary strategy for cognitive maintenance. This scientific reality completely shifts the entire narrative around the concept of the joy of missing out. When you politely decline an invitation on a Friday night to stay indoors, you are not failing at being a functional social human being. You are successfully and instinctively listening to a strict biological imperative. You are intentionally choosing the profound, quiet power of acetylcholine over the exhausting, chaotic treadmill of dopamine. You are choosing neurological depth over meaningless noise, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have established that your brain craves the quiet to activate acetylcholine, but what exactly happens when you are just sitting there, seemingly doing absolutely nothing? Society looks at you staring at the ceiling for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon and aggressively labels it as a waste of time. They tell you that you should be outside making memories, networking, or at least being productive. But neuroscience tells a completely different, almost rebellious story. When you shut out the external noise and allow your mind to wander in a completely safe, low-stimulus environment like your bedroom, you are not turning your brain off. You are actually turning on a highly sophisticated neural circuit called the default mode network. The default mode network is one of the most significant discoveries in modern neuroscience. For decades, scientists believed that the brain was only truly active when it was focused on a specific external task, like solving a math problem or navigating a crowded room. But brain scans revealed a massive paradox. When you stop focusing on the outside world, when you just sit on your couch and let your thoughts drift, a massive network of brain regions suddenly lights up with intense electrical activity. This network is responsible for the highest levels of human cognition. It is the biological engine behind deep self-reflection, complex empathy, and most importantly, profound creativity. When your default mode network is active, your brain is quietly sifting through millions of pieces of stored information, connecting memories with abstract concepts, and solving complex problems that your conscious mind could not figure out. This brings us to the second major twist of our neurological reality. The people who are constantly out socializing, the ones who never spend an evening alone in silence, are functionally suppressing their default mode network. By constantly feeding their brains with immediate external stimuli, they never give their neural architecture the quiet space it desperately needs to process, integrate, and invent. Some of the greatest artistic breakthroughs and scientific discoveries in human history did not happen in the middle of a loud, chaotic networking event. They happened in the quiet isolation of a solitary room, on a peaceful walk, or while staring out of a window on a rainy Sunday. They happened because someone had the courage to stay home and let their default mode network do the heavy lifting. So the next time you feel a wave of guilt for declining an invitation to just stay home and stare blankly at a wall or a television screen, remember the science. You are not wasting your day. You are engaging the most advanced, deeply creative network inside your skull. Doing absolutely nothing in a safe space is, neurologically speaking, actively doing something incredibly profound. Now that you understand the neurological power of your home, you must learn how to engineer it. We call this environmental control. Your physical space is not just a place to sleep, it is a biological charging station, and you need to optimize it for acetylcholine production. First, you have to regulate your sensory input. Start with lighting. Bright, overhead fluorescent lights keep your nervous system in a state of hypervigilance. To signal to your brain that it is safe to shift into parasympathetic dominance, you need warm, low-level lighting. Switch to amber lamps in the evening. Next, manage your auditory environment. Absolute silence can sometimes be deafening, causing the brain to search for threats. Incorporating continuous, low-frequency sounds like brown noise creates an acoustic blanket that lowers your heart rate and stabilizes your neural pathways. Second, you must establish strict neural boundaries. When you receive an invitation that you know will drain you, the hesitation you feel is a spike in cortisol, the stress hormone. You worry about disappointing others. To protect your neurochemistry, you must practice the physiological no. A swift, polite decline without over-explaining prevents cortisol from lingering in your system. Remember, you do not owe anyone an explanation for taking care of your biological needs. However, as a behavioral psychologist, I must give you a critical warning. There is a very fine, invisible line between using your home for neurological healing and using it for psychological avoidance. Healing is intentional. You stay home to recharge and you feel a deep sense of peace and restoration. Avoidance is fear-driven. You stay home because the thought of facing the outside world paralyzes you, and your time indoors is filled with anxiety, not rest. If your home feels like a sanctuary where you recover your energy, you are healing. But if your home feels like a cage that you are terrified to leave, you are avoiding. You must be honest with yourself about which state your brain is in. If it is a sanctuary, you must ruthlessly protect it. The world outside your door is loud for a reason. It relies on external energy to keep the machines of society moving forward. It needs the noise. But it is the quiet minds, the ones who withdraw into their own spaces to process, think, and heal, that keep this world from completely collapsing under its own weight. Your best life is not measured by the number of crowded rooms you stand in, or the amount of photos you force yourself to smile for. Your best life is found in a quiet room, a warm cup of tea, and the profound realization that you owe absolutely no one an explanation for how you regulate your own biology. If understanding the neuroscience behind your behavior brought you peace today, subscribe to this channel. We will continue to explore the deep psychology of your mind. Tonight, as you stay inside, know this. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and you are exactly where you need to be.